The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol. This book is in the public domain. Mind Stuff Experiments, Chapter 2. In order to get a clearer understanding of our subject, you should give some thought to thought itself and to its phenomena. No one knows what thought really is, other than some sort of mental action. But like the unknown element of electricity, we see its manifestations everywhere. We see it in the actions and expressions of a child, in an aged person, in animals, and to varying degrees in every living thing. The more we contemplate and study thought, the more we realize what a terrific force it is and how unlimited its powers are. Glance around as you read this. If you are in a furnished room, your eyes tell you that you're looking at a number of inanimate objects. That is true so far as visual perception is concerned. But you are actually looking at thoughts or ideas which have come into materialization through creative work of some human being. It was a thought, first, that created the furniture, fashioned the window glass, gave form to the draperies and coverings. The automobile, the skyscraper, the great planes that sweep the stratosphere, the sewing machine, the tiny pin, 1,001 things. Yes, millions of objects. Where did they come from originally? Only from one source. From that strange force, thought. As we analyze further, we realize that these achievements, and in fact, all of our possessions, 1,001 things, came as a result of creative thinking. Ralph Waldo Emerson declared that the ancestor of every action is thought. When you understand that, you begin to comprehend that our world is governed by thought, and that everything external had its counterpart originally within the mind. It is just as Buddha said many centuries ago. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. Your very life is your thinking, and the result of your thinking processes. Your flesh, bones, and muscles can be reduced to 70% water and a few chemicals of small value. But it is your mind and what you think that makes you what you are. The secret of success lies not inside, but within the thoughts of man. Figuratively, thought makes giants out of pygmies and often turns giants into pygmies. History is filled with accounts of how thought made weak men strong and strong men weak, and you see evidence of its working around you constantly. You do not eat, wear clothes, run for a bus, drive your car, turn on the television, or read a newspaper. You don't even raise your arm without a preceding thought impulse. While you may consider the motions you make as more or less automatic, perhaps caused by some physical reflexes, behind every single step you take in life, regardless of its direction, is that formidable and powerful force, thought. The very way you walk, the way you carry yourself, your talk, your manner of dress, all reflect your way of thinking. A slovenly carriage is an indication of slovenly thinking, whereas an alert, upright carriage is the outward sign of inward strength and confidence. What you exhibit outwardly, you are inwardly. You are the product of your own thoughts. What you believe yourself to be, you are. Thought is the original source of all wealth, all success, all material gain, all great discoveries and invention, and all achievement. Without it, there would be no medicine, no great museums, no great plays or novels, no modern conveniences. In fact, there would be no advance over life in the most primitive ages. Your thoughts, those that predominate, determine your character, your career, indeed, your everyday life. Thus it becomes easy to understand what is meant by the statement that a man's thoughts make or break him. And when you realize that there can be no action or reaction, either good or bad, without the generating force of thought initiating it, than the biblical saying, "For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap," and Shakespeare's words, "There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so," become more intelligible. Sir Arthur Eddington, the famous English physicist, said that to an altogether unsuspected extent, the universe in which we live is a creation of our minds. While Sir James Jeans, who was equally famous in the same field, suggested that the universe was merely a creation that resulted from the thought of some great universal mind underlying and coordinating all of our minds. More recently, science has uncovered parallels between the behavior of subatomic particles and various tenets of Eastern metaphysics. The greatest scientists and thinkers are not only voicing the ideas of the wisest men of old, but are confirming the fundamental principle of this book. Almost since the beginning of the human race, men have molded by those who knew something of thought's great power. All the great religious leaders, kings, warriors, and statesmen understood this science and have known that people act as they think, and also react to the thought of others, especially when it is stronger and more convincing than their own. Accordingly, men of powerful dynamic thought have always swayed people by appealing to their minds, whether sometimes to lead them into freedom or into slavery. There never was a period of history when we had more reason to study our own thoughts, understand them, and learn how to use them to improve our lives by drawing upon the great source of power within each of us. Undoubtedly, we become what we envisage. There was a time when I would have laughed at people who talked about the magnetic force of thought, how thought correlates with its object, how it can affect people and inanimate things even at great distances. But I no longer laugh, nor do others who know something of its power, for anyone who has any intelligence, sooner or later, comes to realize that thought can change the surface of the entire globe. George Russell, the famous fish editor and poet, was once quoted as saying that we become what we contemplate, and he certainly demonstrated it in his own life by becoming a great writer, lecturer, painter, and poet. However, it must be kept in mind that many of the thoughts we think are not ours at all, at least not of our own originating. We are molded by the thoughts of others, by what we hear in conversation, what we read in newspapers, magazines, and books, what we hear in the movies, on TV, and on the radio, even by chance remarks from bystanders. And these thoughts bombard us constantly, some of them which harmonize with our own inmost thoughts and open the way to greater visions in our life are helpful. But too often these thoughts are upsetting, weaken our self-confidence, and turns us away from our high purpose. It is these outside thoughts that are the troublemakers, and later I shall explain how you can keep free of them. Few people give much thought to the law of cause and effect as it applies to the operation of the mind, much less do they understand the meaning of such axioms as everything is within, nothing is without, or mind is the source of power. A superb explanation of this appeared in an article entitled El Dorado, published in the Commercial and Financial Chronicle back on December 10th, 1932. El Dorado, a country rich beyond all precedent in gold and jewels, lies at every man's door. Your bonanza lies under your feet. Your luck is ready at hand. All is within, nothing is without. Though it often appears that men and peoples, by dumb luck, or avarice, or force, or overreaching, strike upon bonanzas and sail away in fair weather on the sea of prosperity. Man, individually and collectively, is entitled to life in all abundance. It is a most evident fact. Religion and philosophy assert it. History and science prove it. That they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. is the law. What do you seek? Pay the price and take it away. There is no limit to the supply, but the more precious the thing you seek, the higher the price. For everything we obtain, we must barter the gold of our own spirits. Where to find the gold of the all-powerful? One secures the gold of the Spirit when he finds himself. When he finds himself, he finds freedom and all riches, achievement and prosperity. High-sounding talk? No, the most palpable evidence of American history and biography of all history. The concrete proof is apparent even in current events if we but open our eyes. Nothing substantial, lasting, powerful, or moving was ever accomplished, nor ever can be, except by men who have discovered in themselves of the gold of the Spirit, which commands dominion, power, and accomplishment. Men who knew themselves know at once that all material things and ideas have a spiritual counterpart or basis. They see it in money, in credit. The law of supply and demand is not to an awakened man merely an economic principle, but the material of manifestation of spiritual law. Such freedom-seeking men see the same principle operating in gravitation, in chemical affinities, in microcosm, and in microcosm. America has long been the greatest of Eldorados, the stage upon which the most numerous of self-found men worked their bonanzas and their miracles of thought to the enrichment of themselves and mankind at large. There is no exploitation, only a showering of gifts, easily bought by free spirits and generously scattered on all hands according to the express law of bargain of the original permanent owner and first producer. To the self-found man of action, all the money, credit, and capital goods he can use, Mackay, O'Brien, Hearst, and Fair, brave young Americans of 1849, found gold in themselves before they struck it rich in California. They had to. If there is gold there, they told one another, we'll get our share. How great must have been the spiritual wealth of such a free-found man as James J. Hill, who built the Great Northern Railroad from nowhere to nowhere in a wilderness where no one lives. His madness founded an empire. By spiritual force, he turned forest and plains into 1,000 Eldorados, and by the same force commanded all the gold and credit needed for the markets of Amsterdam and London, and enabled millions of Americans to discover for themselves great bonanzas in the cold Northwest. Thomas A. Edison said a few years before he died, "Ideas come from space." This may seem astonishing and impossible to believe, but it is true. Ideas come from out of space. Surely Edison should have known, for few men ever received or gave forth more ideas. Let each man seek the El Dorado within himself. Power is plentiful. The source is inexhaustible. As the canonical fathers of the Church expressed it, that which is received is according to the measure of the recipient. It is not the power that is lacking. It is the will. When one finds oneself, the will becomes automatically set toward El Dorado. By a full and powerful imagination, anything can be brought into concrete form. The great physician Paracelsus said, "The human spirit is so great a thing that no man can express it." Could we rightly comprehend the mind of man, nothing would be impossible to us upon the earth. Through faith, the imagination is invigorated and completed, for it really happens that every doubt mars its perfection. Faith must strengthen the imagination, for faith establishes the will. Faith is personal, individual. Salvation, any way you take it, is personal. Faith comes in the finding of one's self, This self-finding establishes a clear realization of one's identity with the eternal. Strong, self-assertive men built up this El Dorado of America. Man, know thyself, thine own individual self is everlastingly the supreme command. Self-knowers always dwell in El Dorado. They drink from the fountain of youth and are at all times owners of all they wish to enjoy. The words of Paracelsus just quoted are well worth rereading, for once you grasp their meaning and discover how to apply the principle, you will certainly have more light on how to succeed in your undertakings. However, I must point out that hard work alone will not bring success. The world is filled with people who have worked hard but have little to show for it. Something more than hard work is necessary, namely creative thinking and firm belief in your ability to execute your ideas. The successful people in history have succeeded through their thinking. Their hands were merely helpers to their brains. Another important point: for success, it is essential that your desire be an all-obsessing one. Your thoughts and aims be coordinated and your energy be concentrated and applied without let-up. It may be that you want riches or fame or position or knowledge, for each person has their own idea of what success means. But whatever you consider it to be, you can have your objective, provided you are willing to make it the burning desire of your life. A big order, you say? Not at all. By using the dynamic force of believing, you can set all your inner forces in motion, and they in turn will help you reach your goal. If you are married, you remember that stimulating and emotional experience of courting the person you wanted for your spouse. Certainly, it wasn't nerve-wracking work. Quite the contrary, you'll admit. But what were you using, if not this very same science, even though unconsciously? From the time you got the idea until your marriage, the desire to win a partner was uppermost in your mind. The thought, the belief, was with you every minute of the day and perhaps in your dreams as well. Now that you have a clearer picture of the roles that thought and desire play in your daily life, the first thing to determine is precisely what you do want. Starting out with the general idea that you simply want to be a success, as most people do, is too vague. You must have a pattern clearly drawn in your mind. Ask yourself, where are you headed? What is your exact goal? Have you visualized just what you really want? If success is to be measured in terms of wealth, can you fix the amount in figures? If in terms of achievement, can you specify it definitely? You must ask these questions, for in their answers are factors which will determine your whole life from now on. Strange as it may seem, not 1 out of 100 people can answer these questions. Most people have a general desire to succeed, but beyond that, everything is indefinite. They merely go along from day to day, figuring that if they have a good job today, they will have it tomorrow, and that somehow they will be looked after in their old age. They are like corks floating aimlessly on the water, drawn this way and that by various currents, either washing up on shore or becoming waterlogged and eventually sinking. Therefore, it is vital that you know exactly what you want out of life. You must know where you are headed and keep a fixed goal in view. That, of course, is the overall picture. It makes no difference whether you want a job or a better one, a new house, a place in the country, or just a new pair of shoes. You must have a fixed idea before you'll obtain what you are after. Remember, there is a great difference between a need and a desire. You may need a new car for driving to work, and you may desire one in order to give pleasure to your family. The one for business you will buy as a matter of necessity. the one for your family you will plan to get as soon as possible. For this car, you will read brochures and visit a number of dealers because it is a model you have never had before. Something will add to your responsibilities and compel you to seek new powers of judgment within yourself and new resources outside. Desire for something new, something different that is going to change your life makes you exert an extra effort. And the power of believing alone sets in motion those inner forces by which you add what I call plus values to your life. So if you ever hope to achieve anything or gain more than you have now, begin with desire. It is the prime motivating force in all of us, and without an all-consuming desire, nothing can be achieved or gained. However, as you shall see, there is more to it than mere desire. I am aware that metaphysicians claim that thoughts are things. They may be in a general sense, but so far as their effect upon us individually is concerned, they do not become real to us until we give them life with our thinking or through the workings of our imaginations. This may appear a little strange at first reading, but it will perhaps become clearer if I cite a few examples. For instance, you are advised to wear rubbers when you go out in the rain. We've all heard the remark, if you don't, you'll catch your death of cold. The thought has never had the slightest effect upon me. I haven't worn rubbers since I was a small child. I have had my shoes and feet thoroughly wet hundreds of times, often for hours at a time, yet I cannot recall ever having caught a cold as a result. Some people have a tremendous fear of drafts, but I have often thought that if they did catch cold by being in a draft, it was because of their fearful thoughts rather than because of the draft themselves. I sit in drafts for long periods daily, and at night I sleep in a corner room which has windows on two sides. I raise them in all sorts of weather, so that the wind often sweeps across me. Yet I've never had a cold as a result, because I never give it a thought. However, I do not advise anyone accustomed to wearing rubbers to go without them, neither do I suggest to anyone afraid of drafts to stay in them, because lifelong habits and beliefs with their consequences are not going to change overnight. For centuries, outstanding thinkers have claimed that man could shape events and control matter through his mind alone. And the more you study the science, the more you will realize the amazing powers of your own mind. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes and for many years a member of the British Society for Psychic Research, declared that in thought alone there was a constructive and destructive power akin to the faith that can move mountains. He said that while the results themselves were conclusive, he had no idea what power it was that came from a man's mind and that could separate the molecules of a solid object toward which it was directed. I know that materialists will scoff at such a statement, but just remember how radio waves pass right through wood, brick, steel, and other so-called solid objects. If thought waves, or whatever they are, can be tuned to even higher oscillations, why can't they affect the molecules of solid objects? There are many professional gamblers who contend that a strong mental influence has much to do with achieving so-called lucky results in such games of chance as card playing, dice, roulette, etc. I know one man who was able to step up to an old-fashioned cigar store punch board and, with a few punches, grab off the best prizes. Once I asked him about it, and he said, "I never go near a punch board unless I am in the mood for it, and that means that I must be in the frame of mind that I'm going to win." I've noticed that if there's the slightest doubt in my mind, I don't win, but I can't recall the time that I didn't get winning numbers when the winning idea was firmly fixed in my mind before I started to play. At Duke University, Dr. J.B. Rhine and his associates demonstrated that psychokinesis, the name given to designate the mind's power to influence material objects, is much more than idle theory. Dice, yes, the regular old dice used in crap games, were thrown by a mechanical device to eliminate all possibility of personal influence and trickery. Experiments of this type were started in 1934, and there were many tests in which millions of throws of the dice were made. The results were such that Dr. Ryan declared, "There is no better explanation than the subjects influenced the fall of the dice without any recognized physical contact with them." By mentally concentrating upon the appearance of certain numbers, while standing at a distance to avoid all physical contact with the mechanical thrower and with the dice, the experimenters were frequently able to control the way the dice landed. In a number of the experiments, the scores refuted some of the traditional mathematical odds of millions to one against the reappearance of certain combinations of numbers in repeated successions. For more on Dr. Ryan's work, see Chapter 7. Meditate over this for a few minutes and realize what it means to you. Those experiments give you some idea of what is meant by thought creates after its kind. Thought correlates with its object. Thought attracts that upon which it is directed, and similar statements that metaphysicians have been claiming for years. It was Job who said, "For the thing which I greatly feared is come upon me." Our fearful thoughts are just as creative and magnetic in attracting troubles to us as are the constructive and positive thoughts in attracting welcome results. So no matter what the character of your thoughts, they do create after their kind. When this sinks into your consciousness, you get some inkling of the awe-inspiring power which is yours to use. While thoughts do create and exercise control far beyond any limits yet known to man, I cling to the theory that they create only according to their pitch, intensity, emotional quality, depth of feeling, or vibratory plane. In other words, thoughts have a creative or controlling force in the exact ratio of their constancy, intensity, and power comparable to the wavelength of wattage of a broadcasting station. While many explanations have been offered, it is fairly certain that thought is not a form of electrical energy, but something else yet to be defined. In a series of telepathy experiments, subjects were placed in a Faraday cage, which effectively blocked any possible transmission of electrical energy. Yet the subject scores were still well above chance. Whatever was carrying data from one mind to another, it was clearly not electrical. Nevertheless, I have done a great deal of experiments with high-frequency electricity, the field in which the great electrical genius Nikola Tesla pioneered. And so, whenever I think of thought and its radiations or vibrations, I instinctively link them up with electricity and its phenomena. In this manner, they become more understandable to me. I find that I am far from being alone in holding this analogy. Nowadays, practically every hospital is equipped with an EEG, or electroencephalograph, an apparatus that detects and records a patient's brain waves. These waves are, in effect, the electrical oscillation of the brain's two hemispheres. A doctor used them to diagnose not only the health of the brain and nervous system, but as clues to a patient's general mental health, to his or her dreams and emotional state, and even to the existence of disease elsewhere in the body. In 1944, Dr. Arnold S. Burr and his co-workers at Yale University, after experimenting for 12 years, reached the conclusion that all living things are surrounded by an electrical aura of their own making, and that life is connected electrically to the whole pattern of the universe. For years, mystics, occultists, and metaphysicians have claimed that each individual possesses such an aura, and there are countless cases in which these auras have been recorded as actually seen. Then, in the late 1960s, Soviet researchers announced the discovery of Kirlian photography, a technique for capturing the aura on photographic film. Kirlian photos of a leaf showed it to be a galaxy of bright sparkles, which, however, slowly dimmed as the leaf wilted. Kirlian photographs of subjects' hands showed bright rays emanating from the fingers, which seemed to confirm that the metaphysician's age-old belief that one's hands are a source of healing energy. Critics objected that the Kirlian process was recording nothing more than an electrical coronal discharge generated by the mild electrical field in which the photographs were taken. Yet at the same time, it was clear that the strength of the Kirlian aura does correlate with the subject's emotional state. A number of psychologists, notably Dr. Lee R. Steiner of New York, found his correlation so reliable that they used Kirlian photography as an objective measure of their patients' progress. We can reconcile this apparent paradox if we look at electricity, coronal discharges, and the Kirlian effect as byproducts of that yet-to-be-identified thought energy. Just as tidal waves in the ocean are visible translations of earthquakes that may have taken place hundreds of miles away on the seafloor. Hermes Trismegistus and the Anent-Hermetic philosophers all taught the theory of vibration. Pythagoras, the great geometrician and philosopher who lived in the 6th century before Christ, held that everything that exists is a vibration. This is the very essence of our scientific electronic theory of today, that all matter consists of electrons with a negative charge, neutrons with a neutral charge, protons with a positive charge, and other subatomic particles, each with their own charges, which constantly act and react with one another. For want of a better term, I use the word vibration or oscillation. When the vibrations of its component molecules are speeded up, the form of a material object often changes, as when an ice cube melts in a hot skillet and soon evaporates into steam. But the essential differences in matter and in the so-called elements as we know them arise mainly from their differing numbers of electrons, neutrons, and protons. By adding and subtracting protons, nuclear scientists can actually change atoms of one element into atoms of another, thus verifying the ancient alchemists' claim that lesser elements such as iron and lead could be transmuted into silver and gold. The alchemists also were able to heal all disease by the same forces. When you realize that our nervous system is reached only through vibration, in other words, that our 5 known senses record vision, hearing, touch, taste, and smell by means of vibrations given off by the external things themselves, you get a better understanding of the nature of vibrations. For example, we hear a loud noise. It comes to us only via the sound vibration through the air. We see a green leaf, but it is merely a pattern of light waves as gathered by the eyes and transmitted to the brain. There are, however, many vibrations pitched at a much greater frequency than our senses are attuned to, and of which we never have any conscious knowledge. For example, there is a whistle pitched so high that only a dog can hear it. We have all heard of the power of the laying on hands, and most of us know how soothing hands stroking our temples can lessen the intensity of a headache. Can this be due to some form of energy flowing from our finger ends? The Bible tells of numerous instances where healing was accomplished by the touch of Jesus' hand. Does the explanation lie in this little-known field of electricity, the science of vibration? And does this electrical atmosphere, which Dr. Burke claims is of our own making and which surrounds all living things, enable us to cause certain impulses to pour forth literally from our fingers or from our minds, vibratory forces that can act upon others and upon so-called material objects? In the wintertime and at high altitudes, you can feel and often see the electric spark that results from walking across the rug and then touching some metallic object. That, of course, is a form of static electricity generated by friction, but it gives an idea of how one kind of electricity can be developed through the body. Among pictures descriptive of the experiments of Yale investigators is one showing that when subjects dipped their forefingers in saltwater cups connected with a galvanometer, there was a flow of electricity between the positive left hand and the negative right hand, measuring 1.5 millivolts. In another picture, two middle fingers, one with a slight cut at the tip, were partially immersed in the cups. By this time, the polarity of the hands changed, the left hand changing from positive to negative and the right becoming positive, with the current stepping up to 12 millivolts. As I looked at those pictures, I recalled an instrument perfected many years ago by a French scientist, Dr. Hippolyte Baraduc, known as a biometer. It consisted of a bell-shaped glass in which was suspended a copper needle fastened to a fine silk thread. Below the needle, but inside the glass, was a circular piece of cardboard marked off into degrees. Two of these instruments were placed side by side, and the operator held the fingers of both hands within half an inch of the glass. His mind concentrated on the delicately balanced needle. By changing his mental attitude or the polarity of his thinking, the operator could cause corresponding changes in the direction of the needle, now in one direction and now in another, the needle following his changing thought currents. Here is a simple experiment embodying similar principles. Take a piece of medium weight paper, about 3 inches square, and fold it diagonally from one corner to another. Then open it and make another diagonal fold so that there are two folds or creases forming intersecting diagonals. Again, open the paper, which will now present the appearance of a low, partially flattened out pyramid. Now, take a long needle and force it through a cork so that the point extends an inch or so above the top of the cork. Place the cork with its needle point up on an inverted water glass so that there may be free movement of the paper, which is to revolve on the needle point. Then take the piece of paper and place the spot where the creases intersect on the point of the needle with the four sides of the pyramid sloping downward. Place the glass with the cork, needle, and paper on a table or desk in a room free from drafts. Keep away from heat registers or windows, thus avoiding possible heat waves or air currents. Then place your hands around the piece of paper in a semi-cupped position, keeping the fingers a half inch or so away, so that the paper may revolve freely. Now order it to revolve upon the needle point. At first it will wobble, perhaps revolving slowly at first and in one direction or the other. But if your hands remain steady and you concentrate upon a certain direction of movement, the paper will revolve until it turns rapidly upon the needle point. If you mentally order a change in direction, the one-way movement will cease and the paper will start revolving in the opposite direction. Of course, it is essential that you do not breathe or exhale in the direction of the paper. Many explanations of what causes the paper to revolve have been offered: heat waves from the hands, a body reflex of some kind, and the like. If the paper revolved in only one direction, then one of these explanations could be possible. But when a person with a little practice and confident and concentrated thinking can cause the paper to revolve first in one direction and then in another by reversing the polarity of their thinking, it is clear that the principle is the same as that which governs experiments with the biometer. Another similar experiment uses a dialet, a small disc of cardboard bearing the facsimile of the face of a clock, with numbers from 1 to 12. This is better known as the Rosicrucian dialet and is used by Amorc Rosicrucian Brotherhood. A sharp needle is pushed through its center, and on top of the needle is balanced a sliver of thin cardboard in the shape of an arrow. The disc is placed on top of a glass filled with water in which the lower part of the needle is submerged. The operator places their hands around the top of the glass, the disc, and arrow, then orders the arrow to revolve. change its position, or stop at any desired position or number. However, not everyone can immediately get satisfactory results in these experiments because the power of mind, thought concentration, and projective influence vary from individual to individual. If a form of electricity emanates from our hands or fingers in particular, and if waves, either dynamic or magnetic vibrations, are set up by our thinking, we then have an explanation of table tipping, automatic writing, the performances of the planchette or Ouija board, and many other mediumistic and occult operations. Dr. Phillips Thomas, research engineer for the Westinghouse Electric Company in 1937, told the Utah session of the American Electric Institute, "We feel certain that whatever we do, say, or think is accomplished by some type of radiation. We think such radiations are electricity. In the near future, we may be able to capture and interpret these radiations of personality and thought through electrical impulses." Since some of my readers may not have a clear understanding of the radiation of thought, I offer a simple explanation. A pebble tossed into a pond immediately sets up a series of ripples or small waves, which spread out like a circle on the surface of the water and ultimately reach the shoreline, where they appear to stop. The larger the pebble, the higher the waves. Two stones of different sizes and weights, tossed in simultaneously at different places but in close proximity, will each set up a series of waves, converging upon each other. Where the two sets meet, there appears to be a struggle as to which is to overcome or pass the other. As far as our physical vision is concerned, if the waves are of the same size, both seem to stop or merge at their meeting point. But if one is larger than the other, it sweeps over the smaller and creates waves in the wake of the smaller ripples. Think about this in connection with your own mental impulses. For example, how thoughts of one nature stop or overwhelm others. You can readily appreciate that the more powerful or concentrated the thought, the quicker its tempo, the greater its vibration, the more it sweeps aside weaker vibrations, and the more rapidly it does its creative work. We hear much about various stages of meditation, levels of consciousness, thought concentration, the strength of our faith, all of which deals with the intensity or degree of power we send forth. Creative forces comes only when a thought is completely rounded out, when the imagination can visualize the fulfillment of your ambition and see in your mind a picture of the object you desire, a house, a car, a television, just as if you already possess them. After studying the so-called mystic teachings, the various mental sciences, and the regular church teachings, I am convinced that they all work in varying degrees, but only to the extent that their followers believe. So it is with prayer, whether it be a part of a church service or the purely spontaneous and personal supplication of the individual. However, I am forced to conclude that many people go through lip service of saying their prayers without the slightest belief that those prayers will be answered. Consequently, they are not answered. I am frequently reminded of the story of the old lady professing a belief in prayer who planned to go shopping. The day before, she prayed that the sun would shine on her shopping day. Upon completion of her prayer, she glanced out the window, saw some black clouds, and instantly declared, "But I know it's going to rain." In the late fall of 1944, an article by Thomas Sergereau in the Saturday Review of Literature declared that the mind cure movement had grown so rapidly that it was now encountered everywhere. He cited several cases in which sufferers had secured phenomenal results. One woman, who at the age of 62 had been partially crippled, her fingers bent with arthritis, had taken up a system of yogi breathing and had entirely recovered from her physical ailments. Mr. Sergereau declared that after her restoration to health, those who saw her judged her to be about 40. Another woman achieved excellent results under an occult system of metaphysics, and guesses as to her age were 15 years under her real age. Sergereau told also of a retired missionary who for the past 12 years had experimented with psychic phenomena and had obtained most startling results. we can come to only one conclusion. That is that all the systems, creeds, and cults work as a result of the firm beliefs of the individual. And that brings us to the magic of believing. Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, brought forth the hypothesis that a powerful force within us, an unilluminated part of the mind, separate from the conscious mind, is constantly at work molding our thoughts, feelings, and actions. It isn't an organ of so-called physical matter, such as we know the brain to be, and science hasn't located its tangible position in the human body. Nevertheless, it is there. And from the beginning of recorded time, man has known that it exists. The ancients often referred to it as the spirit. Paracelsus called it the will. Others have called it the mind, an adjunct of the brain. Some have referred to it as conscience, the creator of the still small voice within. Others have called this division of our mental existence the soul, and some metaphysical teachers claim that it is located in the solar plexus. Others call it the superego, the inner power, the superconsciousness, the unconsciousness, the subconscious, and various other names. Still, others have asserted that it is a part of the supreme intelligence to which we are all linked. Hence the name universal mind, that which embraces every living thing, all human as well as plant and animal life. No matter what we call it, I prefer the term subconscious. It is recognized as the essence of life, and the limits of its power are unknown. It never sleeps. It comes to our support in times of great trouble. It warns us of impending danger. It often aids us to do what seems impossible. It guides us in many ways, and when properly employed, performs so-called miracles. Objectively, it does as it is told. That is, when it is commanded or besought by the conscious mind. Subjectively, it acts primarily upon its own initiative, although there are times when its activity appears to be the result of influence from the outside. Sir Arthur Eddington is quoted as saying, "I believe that the mind has the power to affect groups of atoms and even tamper with the odds of atomic behavior, and that even the course of the world is not predetermined by physical laws, but may be altered by the uncaused volition of human beings." When this idea is fully comprehended, it becomes breathtaking. It is more understandable in the light of the electronic or vibratory theory. Every student of the subject knows what may be accomplished by getting into direct contact with the subconscious mind. Thousands have employed it to achieve wealth, power, and fame in this world, as well as to cure physical ailments and solve countless human problems. And its power is there for you to use. The only steps you have to take are to believe in its power and use the techniques set forth in this book, or else devise a system of your own that will put it to work for you. Dana Thlee's syndicated column covering the observations of Hillbilly was well known to newspaper readers in the 1920s. He once told me that he considered the subconscious mind one of his greatest aids, not only in furnishing him with ideas, but in helping him find lost tools and other articles. Mr. Sleeth at the time was living in the hills, remote from cities and towns, alternating as a columnist and farmer. He had made an extensive study on the subject, and we often discussed it in letters covering our ideas. "It's a wonderful thing, the subconscious mind," said Mr. Sleeth, "and for the life of me I can't see why more people don't learn about it and its use. I don't know how many thousands of times it has helped me with my problems. Ideas for feature stories have often come to me when I was engaged in such lowly tasks as stump grubbing. And as for locating lost tools, it's a knockout. You know, nothing is ever lost. It's just misplaced. It's right there to be found in the exact place where you left it or dropped it. I have found dozens of misplaced tools in the identical spot where my subconscious mind told me to look. Say, for example, it was a pocket knife. Mine's a good size one that I had misplaced or dropped. I would say, pocket knife, where are you? Then I would close my eyes for a moment, or I might gaze off into space. The answer might not always come immediately, but when it did, it would come in a flash, and I would be led right to the spot where lay the knife. It always seems to work unfailingly, even to such things as axes, rakes, and other tools that I was constantly leaving around somewhere. You know, we newspaper people are not very methodical. I used to have a great deal of difficulty in remembering names, but I have found that if I could visualize the man or woman whose name I had temporarily forgotten and see an outline of his or her features, the color of the eyes, hair, manner of dress, etc., the subconscious would bring me the name without difficulty. I don't know where I learned this, but in trying to recall something, a certain story or a certain fact that appeared at the moment to escape me, I would relax, elevate my head, and put my right hand a couple of inches above my forehead. And sometimes I might close my eyes or gaze off into space, but this little trick always seemed to get results. Never forget, inventions, great musical compositions, poetry, fiction, and all other ideas for original accomplishment come from the subconscious. Give it the thought or the material and keep it going with a deep-rooted desire for performance, and you will get results. There is an old saying that once we start weaving, the gods will furnish the skein, and how true that is. When you start to operate with the aid of this power, the bricks automatically fall into place as though a magical hand had touched them. Results will certainly follow in a most astounding manner. Ideas for accomplishment will pop here and they will pop there. What may appear as coincidence are not coincidences at all, but simply the working out of the pattern which you started with your own weaving. I am certain that thousands of successful men and women reach great heights and accomplish marvelous results without knowing anything about the subconscious mind and with no knowledge that it was the power which made for accomplishments. Living here in the hills away from people and everyday influences, I have often felt that those who live close to nature were in a much better position to utilize the subconscious than others. I believe that day will come when science will prove that the great power of the subconscious is one of the most formidable forces in shaping and controlling our lives. A passing momentary thought flicker dies almost in birth, although it may later reveal cumulative power. But the force that brings into play the great system of the subconscious is a sustained thought, or, as I mentioned before, a fixed mental picture. In order to bring subconscious forces into action, there are many methods for stepping up the tempo of the vibrations of conscious thought, although sometimes just a single utterance, a momentary glance, and a word or two traveling from one person to another will bring the subconscious into immediate action. So it is with catastrophic danger, moments of great peril, and periods of great stress, which suddenly confront a person with the necessity for immediate action. The subconscious comes to the aid of those in the habit of making quick decisions almost instantaneously, and it comes into operation when you have cleared your conscious mind of its multitude of conflicting thoughts. Going into the silence is another way of expressing it. Don Juan told Carlos Castaneda that the mind's constant chatter was a major barrier to getting in touch with any higher guidance. Perhaps the most effective method of bringing the subconscious into practical play is through making mental pictures. Use your imagination to perfect an image of the thing or situation as you would like it to exist in physical form. This is usually referred to as visualization. However, most sustained and continuing manifestations come as a result of deep-seated belief. Through this belief, with its strange power, miracles happen and peculiar phenomena occur for which there appears to be no known explanation. I refer now to unquestioning belief, a firm and positive conviction that goes through every fiber of your being when you believe with your heart and soul. Call it a phase of emotion, a spiritual force, a type of electrical vibration, anything you please. But that's the force that brings outstanding results, sets the law of attraction into operation, and allows sustained thought to correlate with its object. Belief changes the tempo of the mind or thought frequency. Like a huge magnet, it draws the subconscious forces into play, changing your whole aura and affecting everything about you, including people and objects at great distances. It often brings into your individual sphere of life results that are sometimes startling, results you never dreamed possible. Countless references to belief appear in the Bible. It is the first condition for membership in many religious, fraternal, and political organizations. Leaders everywhere are looking for people who have the kinds of belief they will fight for, because the people charged with the vibration of strong beliefs sometimes do the miraculous, things others often say are unbelievable. That kind of belief has the magic touch. Indeed, it is the basic principle in both white and black magic. End of chapter. Please do hit that like button. Share this with anyone you feel that might benefit from these words, and also subscribe to the channel. Head over to the next video where we continue with chapter 3, what the subconscious really is. I want to know. How about you?